and they were on the graveyard. She said that around 3 AM, this guy started calling and asking for Vietnamese. They would get the interpreter, and then a woman would come on the line speaking Spanish. So they would disconnect and call with him. He kept calling, so they started to ignore his request for an interpreter. Then things started getting strange. He started saying some really rude stuff, and then they would hear the keys of his phone being pressed. Now, I had brought this up with our team leader, and she told us to trace his calls if we could. Yes, we did have call trace, which is pretty cool. So they kept him on the line and started to trace the call. But then they realized that he was transferring the call. The phone started ringing like the sound when you call out to someone, and then someone answered on the other line. "Hello, 911, what's your emergency?" The really strange thing about this is that we're not in the USA. Not even close. It's kind of hard to make conference calls if you don't really know how, and also kind of hard to find an international number for 911. Normally, if you dial 911, it redirects you to the country of the emergency service that you're in. So we have no idea how he was doing it. But the guy was kind of putting on a voice, so it's hard to tell if he was American. Although a detail that happens later makes me think that he was. He never stayed on the line enough for us to finish the call trace. So the girl at work ends up saying sorry and explaining the situation to 911, and they were about as freaked out as we were. But the conference didn't collapse. If the caller who made the conference hangs up, then the conference would collapse. So this guy just stayed on the line listening to the people from the two different countries try and work out why they were speaking to each other. Other calls that night that I've been told about include one where they heard a bomb countdown timer. They weren't sure if it was live or a recording, but it sounded like 10 seconds until detonation, and then it started counting down. It never finished the detonation countdown, and the call just ended before. He also called a police station in America and conferenced us into them, and then just hung up the line not saying anything. But I'm not sure on the details of that one. So anyway, a few days later we started our night shift rotation. What I'm about to explain only happened 2 nights ago, so it's still quite fresh. At about 4 AM, the girl I work with, pretty calmly I might add, yells out, "Oh, it's this dickhead again," and then puts the phone on speaker so that we can hear it. What I heard on the other line made my eyes water and my skin crawl. In the most horrible voice, deep and rusty, and almost like a whisper coming out of the speaker, was this horrible voice mixed with horrible words. "I am going to kill you." Everyone froze. This was pretty creepy and serious, even for us. Then immediately he transferred to another line. This time he didn't stay quiet. An American man answered the phone, and just let me throw in there that he had a really awesome manner and accent. Their conversation went like this. "Hello? Hi, I'm just calling in relation to an Xbox you put up on Craigslist." "Oh yeah? It comes with 2 controllers and some games." They had a conversation about, "My name is Mel." I always use that name even though it wasn't my own. "Can you screw me, please? Come here and screw the shit out of me. If you don't, I am going to kill you." At this point, I put it on speaker. I was supposed to mute it, but I'm not sure if I did. I was trying to figure out how to trace the call, and then he said, "How do you call trace?" and just hung up. The most recent thing he's done. If he calls again, I'm gonna have to make a video about it or something. And this guy's voice is beyond creepy. Everyone in the office is worried. Is he local to us? Is he gonna take his threat seriously? Is he just playing with us and waiting before he does something more dark and devious? These are the kind of questions that are constantly on our mind as we work the night shift. I really hope we don't have to find out. And hopefully, he leaves his nighttime antics so that we can get some peace. Either way, I hope I never have to hear his voice again. And better yet, never have to meet. I run security for a law firm, mainly offices and file storage. I've had a few strange experiences. About a week after I started, I was patrolling basement level 1. This building used to be a bank, so it has some huge metal vault doors in it, where they contained all the stored files for data protection. This vault door remains locked and has done for about 2 years. Anyway, as I'm walking past, I can hear a very faint scratching sound coming from the wall next to the door. I thought nothing of it, passing it off as just rats. As I begin to walk away, I hear a loud thud on the side of the door. Being the badass I am, I decide that it's finally time for some action. I open the vault and find paperwork covering the floor, and no sign of life inside. Cobwebs and dust everywhere. It was like breathing in a vacuum bag. I wrote a report, but heard nothing more of this. Fingers crossed I have a ghost in my building, so I can at least have some conversation at night. About 2 weeks ago though, I was patrolling an area. It's around 11 PM, and I've just finished my KFC. All is going well, and I'm patrolling like normal, walking floor to floor, closing blinds, and turning off lights. I do this from top floor to basement level 2. I've just shut down the second floor, and am proceeding down the stairs to the first. As I hit the first floor door, I hear very loud stamping running from just above me and through the building. I never found a soul, and the camera never showed anything either. Maybe someone had just put acid in my chicken. When I was 18, I worked at a local coffee shop in my hometown, and I often worked there picking up night shift and closing 6 nights a week. I had a lot of regulars and lots of randoms, but then maybe a few awkward customers. I never really had a problem with a customer being inappropriate or out of hand. This night was already really stressful for me, as it was Halloween. Not that it had anything to do with the interaction, and I was a little bummed out to be closing while my friends were out and about. But I had friends to go to a house that my friends had rented right down the street after work, and I had some pastries and some Red Bull, so I really didn't mind much. It was about 9:45, and I was already ready to close for 10. It had been dead since about 8, and all I had to do was a final register count. Everything was clean, and I was reading a book to pass the time, trying not to watch the clock. Our counter, by the way, is like a bar counter, long, with the register near the door, at the closed end, and with the one far end open for us to go in and out of, right near the door to our back room. A man walked into the front door. He looked about mid-20s. He was black and had on a big hoodie, and was wearing sweatpants that sagged down, so I could see the waistband of 2 different pair of gym shorts underneath. I am a young white female, but I have no fear of people, and I didn't bat an eyelid when he walked in with one hand in his hooded pocket, and the other in the pocket of one of his pair of gym shorts. I greeted him and asked him how he was and what he would like to order. He took his time responding, but wasn't looking at the menu or at our chalkboard with the seasonal drinks offers. He was looking at the front door. He took about a minute, then turned to me to ask my name. I often had a male customer ask me this, and females too sometimes, so I told him, and then I asked him what he would like to order. He began to ask me more questions about me and my job. He asked if I liked it. I responded, thinking maybe he wanted a job application, and gave him a very short version of how I felt. It was almost 9:50 at this point, and I kept checking my phone, thinking that I just wanted to make his drink, so that I could clean up and meet my friends. He nodded, saying he thought I liked my job, which I thought was strange, but again, didn't think about it. I again agreed, and he started to ask me about the shifts I worked. I figured that he had sympathy that it was Halloween, and I gave him a vague answer. He then asked why I didn't work on Thursdays. My heart jumped. I didn't see that one coming a mile away. I struggled to respond, and he continued and asked if Sunday mornings were better than Wednesday nights. At this point, I broke into nervous laughter and smiles, asking him if he was looking to work for the coffee shop and that we needed the help. He stopped smiling at this point, and his hand in the hooded pocket made an abrupt move to the very inside pair of gym shorts, basically so that he would be grabbing himself. He didn't quite reach in all the way, and I felt like I was going to pass out. I asked him to order or leave, as it was the end of our business day, and it was almost there, and I needed to clean and lock up. At this point, I grabbed my cell phone and kept it in my hand, thinking how I could dial 911 and not have him begin to molest himself in front of me, or whatever it was that he planned on doing with his hand down there. He began to sort of lean on the counter and ask me questions. He asked me where I lived, if I had a boyfriend, and what were my plans for the night. I was trying hard not to cry, and tried my best to lie through more vague answers, hoping he would go away if I just didn't freak out. He began to move away from the register, still leaning on the counter, hands in his pants towards the open end of the bar. I began to back as far towards the front door as possible, but that end had no opening and was so high. I couldn't jump it without considerable effort and climbing over an espresso machine. The only other exit I could think of was our narrow drive-through window. Clutching my phone, I asked him what he wanted. For some reason he stopped. He looked up and looked towards the front door, then turned to look at the clock behind him. I took a chance to start writing a text message to my friend, and I said, "If I'm not at your place in 10 minutes, call the police." He caught me sending the text and asked who I was texting. I told him it was my boyfriend, and his face contorted into something that I shall never forget. His eyes blazed as he was still as stone. He calmly told me to throw my cell phone across the floor, specifically telling me to try and throw it into the drive-thru. I really had to toss it about 9 feet away. After, he began to scream, making his way again down the counter, and he asked me how I could have a boyfriend when he's been watching me work for the last 2 months as often as possible and had never seen a man drop me off or pick me up at work. He pointed to the sides of the buildings that I had parked on, and said that he knew I parked my blue Toyota there earlier, and not to lie to him. I asked him to leave, and was beginning to cry. He began to describe my work shifts to a T. When I came in, when I left, how I smoked across the street on break, and he told me that he knew I only drank the Diet Coke that we sold, and that I always cranked up my music when I started my car. At this point he pulled out a small gun from his gym shorts and waved it around. He said that it was stupid to lie to him, and that he knew it all. He was going between enraged and laughing, as if he couldn't believe that I didn't want to talk to him, or that it was funny that I was scared. I offered him all the money in the register and he laughed again, hysterically, and then went still. He said, "I'll never forget this moment. I'm not here for any money, Marina. I'm not here for a job. I think you know what I'm here for." I'm sobbing now, and it made him either frustrated or sympathetic, and he began to say how I just needed to calm down, and that he was just really excited to meet me. He still had one hand down near his dick, and began to fondle himself holding the gun with the other, about 3 feet away from the opening in the bar. I asked him to please leave. When he didn't move, I asked him what I did to him and why this was happening. And then he began to speak, saying that I was really pretty. He was continuing to talk when all of a sudden, my friend walked in the door with his friends in tow, and there were 5 guys all together, all in a metal band, so they were a pretty distinct group of guys. The man quickly put the gun in his hoodie pocket, so quickly in fact, that only 2 of my friends noticed it. He then ran for the door, pushing past my friends, and disappeared into the night. I threw up as soon as he was gone, and 2 of my friends ran out after him, but didn't gain enough on him, and didn't see to where he went. I quit my job the next day, and called the police. There never was any follow-up, and I still wonder about what the hell happened to me that night. The guy knew my shifts, knew when I arrived. Hell, if he knew all my shifts, he probably even knew where I lived. I was profoundly creeped out, and found it hard to feel safe at work for a long time. Of course, I found a much better job shortly after, but even then didn't feel secure. I hope he didn't follow me. Who knows? Maybe he's still out there, watching, lurking, and waiting for his next attempt at contact. I used to work at a gas station that was also a mini-mart. At daytime, they'd have 2 attendants, but the graveyard shift flew solo. I am a bit of an introvert, so long hours alone in the middle of the night suited me just fine. Well, one night, about an hour into my shift, a girl comes into the store. I've never seen her before in my life, but she starts chatting to me. I figure she's probably bored and has nothing else to do. No biggie. That happens pretty regularly. Usually I just smile and nod, and eventually they'll leave. Well, I started getting the impression that she liked me, and honestly the feeling wasn't mutual, so the situation was getting uncomfortable. She explained how she was new in the area, just got out of a bad relationship with a drug addict, and how she wanted to make some new friends. How she had a drug problem herself, and it just kept getting more and more awkward. At one point, she even talked about how much she enjoyed giving blowjobs. Like, what the hell? A customer would show up and I'd excuse myself, and she would sit there and wait for me to be done. I'd tell her that I needed to do some cleaning up, hoping that she would get bored and just leave. But she wasn't going away, and I was getting more and more uncomfortable. She never left, She stayed for a whole freaking 7 hours, just talking and talking. Finally, at 7 a.m, my relief showed up so that I could go home. She tried to give me her phone number, and I pretended to put it in my phone. And she's like, "We should date, call me sometime." Huh? No way. I went home in such relief, so glad it was over. Except it wasn't. 2 days later, I ran into her again. I had just woken up from my bed and was heading into the kitchen to get some cereal, when I find her sleeping on my couch in the living room. She wakes up and says, "Good morning, found you." I come to find out she met my roommate the previous night and invited her to stay the night because she had twisted her ankle and couldn't walk home. I worked night shifts at a county jail for a little over 2 years, and we had some weird-ass things happening. A lot of the staff and inmates believed the jail was straight haunted, or had a presence. The stories were pretty interesting, and sometimes I'd see something weird or hear a strange noise. A lot of noises I would often write off as just an inmate yelling or doing something stupid. It is a jail after all, but there are a couple of moments I've had a hard time explaining away. One night, after we locked all the inmates down, me and another officer went and chilled in the tower, as this is where all the video monitors are located. Outside the tower is a slim hallway that circles it, the pod where the inmates stay, and the doors are secured, and the only way to get through these doors is by someone opening the door in the tower. Anyway, my buddy and I were chilling in the tower just talking about random shit. If someone isn't brought in at night, the hours are pretty slow. Then, something slams against the tower door. Both of us nearly jump out our seats. The thud shook the walls of the tower. The first thing we think is that an inmate has somehow escaped their cell and got through their pod door. Our only other co-worker was still sitting in the booking area, and we could see the camera. It was the only plausible thought. We both jumped out and pulled out our tasers. We opened the tower door, and nothing was there. I took off down one side of the hall, while my partner took the other. We both ran around the hall, and met each other on the other side. We looked around, and there was no sign of anybody else there. All pod and cell doors were secured. We both walked back into the tower and stared at each other. It was way too loud and forceful to be an inmate kicking their cell door, and we talked about it several times and tried to think of ways to debunk it, but we couldn't. For the rest of the night, we were scared shitless. There were also other occasions that revolved around seeing black shadows on the camera. I remember that me and 2 other co-workers were in the tower at night, and I saw a shadow on the wall of the rec room. I pointed it out, and we watched it glide across the wall, then stop, move back over, move up a little bit, and continue this for about 3 minutes. Then it went up and disappeared out of view of the camera. It was about 1 in the morning, so it obviously wasn't an inmate or anyone in there. But one of my co-workers who refuses to believe in paranormal stuff wrote it off as a bug on the camera lens. But I don't think that that's the case. Another time, we walked into the booking area and the chair was rocking back and forth like someone was in it. The next story deals with more of a crazy individual, but it was still odd. Me and another officer were in the booking area. An inmate in a cell was asking if she could have some of her stuff back, as another officer took her things because she kept kicking the door and threw her stuff everywhere. She had been compliant the whole week, and we informed her that she could have some of her things back. We gave her her tote, which had practically all of her stuff, and she seemed so thankful when we handed it back. We go back to what we were doing, and 15 minutes later, she starts screaming and cursing. We tell her to knock it off, and she screams at us to shut the hell up. I open up the window to her cell, and she's staring at me, and she starts accusing me of cursing her Bible. I tell her that I haven't touched her Bible, and she calls me a liar. We open up her cell, and she opens up the Bible and tells me that all the words are backwards. The text in the Bible was completely normal, but she had drawn some pretty weird figures in the Bible itself. I take it and tell her that she's had enough of the Bible, since that is what sparked her little episode. I look over in her cell, and she has drawn a ginormous demon head in her cell room. I yell at her for damaging property, and she starts mumbling some gibberish. My co-worker and I